Um, so I'll introduce our speaker for the evening, Mr. Scott Murdock. Scott has studied buildings for decades, both professionally and as a hobby. His architectural history interest started with mid 20th century military buildings, but his current passion is thin shell concrete construction. He steered some of his projects toward that subject while earning his MA in public history, and now spends his free time researching and documenting examples of the form. And you can see his thin shell buildings on his website, www.thinshell.net. And I've perused that quite a bit, and it's a
And I
fantastic
think
little resource.
sorry to interrupt. I think it's thin-shell.net. Is that right, Scott?
That's
Thin
correct.
shell.
Okay.
And it's on my slides too.
Okay.
And your talk is titled Thin Shell Concrete and Modernism, an overlap of function and form. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Scott.
Okay, thank you. So about 50 slides, very fine print. I'm just going to read to you for about 2 hours. I'm just kidding. I want to breeze through a couple of slides just to set the stage and then spend most of our time just looking at pictures of buildings and talking about them. What is thin shell concrete? That's a question I get a lot. And it's a structural form. It's not an architectural style, but it's making use of reinforced concrete, making it stronger either through curvature or folds or corrugations, so that a very thin concrete slab can do a lot more work. It's primarily for roofs. In some cases, such as in a dome or a barrel vault, that roof can really merge into the walls. I want to look at how it merges with modernism and then show you some examples, a few nationwide, but then a focus on buildings that are right here in Colorado. And my email, my website are at the bottom there. If you're interested in this sort of thing, I always love to talk about thin shell. You probably know of buildings, I don't, and I'd love to hear about those from you. So like I said, it's those curves or folds in reinforced concrete that allow a fairly thin, like 2 to 5 inches, concrete roof to serve not only as the support, but the enclosure. So you don't need that separate structure of trusses covered by our roofing surface. The appearance can be anything from barrel vaults, domes, my favorite term in the world, hyperbolic, paraboloid, even a hyperboloid of one sheet. If anybody has seen the very cool planetarium in St. Louis, it's got that hourglass type shape, much like a cooling tower at a power plant. That's the hyperboloid of one sheet. Very fancy term. A hyperbolic paraboloid, think of that as a surface that curves in 2 directions simultaneously, much like a saddle does, or the most common example, a Pringles chip. You have the one curve going convex and at the same time another curve going concave. So I'll show you examples of several of these that we have locally. Now, how does it fit with modernism? Well, it's a wonderful overlap. Thin shells really came into being in the 20s and 30s, really got their start in Germany and came to the US starting in 1934. They kind of really started to fade out about 1970. There were still a few built in the 70s, but not very many. And I've read a few writers who say that the last significant thin shell building was the King Dome in Seattle in 1975. So that kind of ties that era of thin shell, and it merges pretty well with modernism. And thin shell is a structural technique. It's not an architectural style, but it goes well with several of the styles that fit during this modernism period. So it's neither one caused the other, but they certainly went well together. So like I said, I'll show you a couple examples, and these are primarily my own photos that I've taken. Every chance I get, I'm traveling around looking at buildings. Show you some national examples and then focus in on quite a few that are still here in Colorado. I'll point out some confusion that can happen because some of these forms were copied. And I've rushed excitedly to a building thinking it was concrete shell or folded plates and discovered it was a plywood stressed skin system or a plywood dome. So I'll point out a few of those examples as well. And there have been some wonderful thin shell structures that have been demolished. I'll show you a few local examples of those that will make us very sad. The Hershey Arena right now is the oldest extant thin shell concrete structure. 1936, and this was engineered by Anton Tedesco, who really brought thin shell concrete to the US from Germany. He actually had access to the patents and was sent over as a representative, and it took off from there. Then this is, if you ever want to read up on this building, a fascinating story because the labor to build it consisted of Hershey's workers who had no experience in concrete, much less with this radical, thin concrete form. So Mr. Tedesco found himself serving not only as the engineer, but the construction supervisor, foreman, trainer, sort of jack of all trades to get this built. And I took these photos in 2019. That building is still standing and it still looks pretty darn good. So what we have there is a barrel vault. The span on that thing, check my notes here, 222 feet across is the span of that arch. And towards the crown, that shell is 3.5 inches thick of reinforced concrete. So picture 3.5 inches and then step back and picture that arch spanning 222 feet. Of course, it does have, as you can see, supporting ribs that add a lot of structural strength to that. So this is the oldest example we have. So for me, it was kind of a must-see. And we actually engineered a vacation around stopping by to see that building. So Anton Tedesco, a lot of authors like to call him the father of thin shell concrete in America, which is pretty fair from what I've read. Now here's another example. This is a post office up in Providence, Rhode Island. Now what you see are a group of barrel vaults assembled to form groined vaults. And it's fairly large. Looking at it, you wouldn't guess necessarily that it's concrete. That's often the case with these buildings because a big thing with concrete roofs is you still have to waterproof them. You got to do something to keep the water out. So they frequently end up with anything from just an elastomer coating to god awful, ugly sheets of roofing material just plopped on them. Insulation is often also applied on the outside of the shell underneath a membrane. So it can really distract from the pure appearance of that concrete shell. But that's what that is. This is one of my favorites. Assembly Hall of University of Illinois. Now that is a 400-foot diameter dome. Built in 1963. And this is an interesting structure because it's a dome, but it's also constructed of folded plates. So you have a combination of things happen here. You have a curvature of the dome, as well as if you look close, you can see very complex sets of folds that add tremendous strength to that. And at its thinnest parts, that shell is 3.5 inches thick of reinforced concrete. And it seems to be when I visit buildings, that's usually when a thunderstorm rolls in. And in this case, it made for a very dramatic effect to show off the roof. That roof could easily disappear in a bright sky. Now, this one got a lot of attention in journals and magazines, um, partly because it was designed by Max Abramovitz of Harrison and Abramovitz, already a famous firm at the time. And so, famous firm designing an amazing structure like this, it certainly got a lot of attention. So that's one of my favorites. And it's the reason we passed through Illinois on our vacation. Another vacation spot I highly recommend, Warm Mineral Springs Inn. It's near Sarasota, Florida. The entire roof system of this motel is made up of these thin shell concrete inverted umbrellas. And I'll show another example in an upcoming slide to explain that better. But those umbrella shells are 2 inches thick. I thought that was a very thin number, so I verified it while I was staying there. The maintenance guys were kind enough to leave a ladder out within reach. And so 2 inches thick. And when you see an inverted umbrella like this, there's normally a drain pipe going right down through that central column to carry away the rainwater. Now, in this case, these umbrellas were arranged at these different heights, and originally there were windows in those gaps, which I imagine would have been stunning to see. But apparently, the bright, direct Florida sunlight was too much, and they were eventually taken out. And as you can see in this interior picture, they've been infilled with, just wall material. It's very sad, but one of my favorite places. Now, here's a couple of examples of thin shell concrete in a very basic form as picnic shelters, which I think is great because it just lets us see the structure. On the left, you see an inverted umbrella. This one is 16 feet by 16 feet square. I was not able to reach up and check the thickness, but it's about 3 inches or so. So you've got 4 panels that make up this square. Each one is a hyperbolic paraboloid sheet. So if you picture that square surface, say if you take a handkerchief, set it down on a table, pin down 3 corners, and lift that 4th corner up, you'll see those double curves start to take shape in there. And so that's what we have there. There's 4 panels joined at the edges and mounted on that central column. And there's a lot of strength in this shape. Of course, we know concrete is really strong under compression, direct pressure put on it, but it's not so strong under tension being pulled apart. In this case, the weight of that shell is traveling down at that slight angle through those 4 shell pieces to that central column. So it's in compression entirely. So it's a very strong structure. And this is the only place I've seen an inverted umbrella used as a picnic shelter. It's here in Jolly, Texas, which is a tiny stop on the road outside of Wichita Falls. Now, on the right, you'll see a far more common example. There's literally a few dozen of these across Kansas if you ever take the interstate across. The odd thing here is this is a mirror image, essentially, of the other. So it's an umbrella shape. Newspapers often call them a toadstool shape or a mushroom shape. So in theory, this is not as strong. Because of the way that weight is carried down from the column, it's putting that concrete in tension. So the textbooks will tell you that's not the way to do it. That's not the strong way to use your reinforced concrete. And yet, here we are 50 some years later, and they're in pretty darn good shape. And so in this case, with the mushroom shape, that central column, there's no need for a drain, which is a good advantage. So the water can freely drain off. Whereas the one on the left, If that central drain fills up, then you're going to have an issue with water spilling over. Now, notice how the Texas shelter here is tipped up at an angle. So you can imagine if you used a bunch of these to construct a motel, like this previous example, if they were tipped up, you could actually create a north light window situation. So I like these picnic shelters because they're just very stripped down, just shows us the structural form. I get a lot of funny looks when I jump out of the car at a rest stop and start taking pictures of the shelters. Now, Columbus, Ohio is home to Scioto Downs, which is a racetrack. It has this beautiful grandstand. Unfortunately, as you can see, it's partially wrapped up in a black safety netting. I talked to one of the workers that I encountered there, and apparently they had issues with concrete spalling off of that shell. So the area directly around it, you can see a fence. So they're not using that grandstand at the present. My fear is it's about to be demolished. This is a casino operation. That's a money operation. I can't really see them taking the time to fix an ancient building like this. This one was built in 1960. And what we have up there are 6 inverted umbrellas. So that structure from that Texas rest stop, only they're rectangular instead of square. These are 60 feet wide and 116 feet long, and they're 4 inches thick. So it's a great example of very large inverted umbrellas. And every once in a while, I check Google Earth to see if it's still standing, and it is so far, but I cross my fingers every time. So those are a few examples from around the country. We certainly have a lot right here in Colorado, especially right around the Front Range. 2 engineers I'll mention because they contributed heavily to this. Anton Tedesco, the gentleman that did the Hershey Arena, he did, I think, 4 shells right here in Denver. Milo Ketchum, a local engineer, did quite a few as well. I want to say 36 thin shells that I found so far. There may be more that I just haven't encountered. So I'll start with the Denver Coliseum, which you may have attended events there. You may have just seen it as you cruised by on I-70, just a few feet away from it. Notice the similarity to that building in Hershey. You've got the large barrel vault. You've got reinforcing ribs on the outside of the shell. This was built in 1952. So in those intervening years between 1936 and 1952, Tedesco had done a lot of work for the military, building warehouses and hangars, all with barrel vaults of various sizes and dimensions. So this was his specialty by this time. Now this is larger than Hershey. That barrel vault spans 253 feet and 8 inches across. So that's a pretty wide reach. And towards the crown, this shell is 4 inches thick. Now, the architect that worked on this with Tedesco was Roland Linder. Local, but actually standing in for the New York firm of Lorimer and Rose. But Anton Tedesco himself signed off on the drawings for this. I actually visited the Coliseum a few years ago, and they were kind enough to let me look at their original drawings, which they had sitting around. So I got to verify Anton's signature on there. So a very large shell, largest barrel vault in town, I would say, of thin shell concrete. An interesting detail in the bottom right there you've got these large buttresses on each side of this shell. Those ribs, supporting ribs, meet those buttresses, but the buttresses are opened up with arches to allow them to become hallways. It's very good use. Now, while we're talking about large barrel vaults, this is a hangar out on Buckley Air Force Base, built as a Naval Air Reserve training hangar, right in that same time frame. This was also 1952 construction. And this one was a prototype, and the Navy actually built 7 identical hangars, with this being the first one of this design. Looking inside, of course, I had to get permission and an escort to take these photos. Wasn't allowed to photograph any aircraft or anything, so that's about the only interior photo I have for you, is looking up at the roof. And there's so much material there, struts, lighting, gantry cranes, electric conduit, that you really don't realize it's just a thin shell when you look at it. And this one spans 136 feet across, so it's significantly smaller than the Coliseum. Another example of barrel vaults in a warehouse type building that's very hard to photograph is a Western Electric warehouse. And I'll mention, if you want any more details on any of these, almost all these buildings are shown on my website. And there I have, if I know it, the architect's name, engineer's name, some of these key dimensions. So if you see one that captures your interest, it's either on my website now or it will be soon. Now, this one I had to get some photos, but as you can tell, I barely was able to catch those supporting arches from a distance. The roof has a parapet around most of it that makes it really hard to see the actual barrel vaults. But still, it's a very cool building, I think. And again, this was one of Anton Tedesco's. And I was able to view actual original pencil drawings of this building and was able to verify his initials on those as well. So I'm kind of a nerd, in case you can't tell. Now we switch to Milo S. Ketchum, local engineer. He quickly became one of my favorite engineers to study because of the work he's done. And by all accounts, he was a really nice person as well. This is
I know him.
excellent. Excellent. So this was his office building, and Mr. Gash, you may be familiar with this. It's at 730 Calumet. Built this for his firm in 1957. Worked with architect Jerome Nagel on this. So what we have here are 5 barrel vaults. Each of them is 38 feet front to back and 20 feet across. And the way this building was configured, the side we're looking at in these photos is the north-facing side. These sunshades are shorter here to allow more light to come in. So on this whole side of the building, for drafting tables, you had that nice indirect north light coming over. The sunshades are actually a little bit deeper on the back side, which is much harder to photograph. Now, a couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to spend 2 days in this building as a tour guide during Doors Open Denver. And the number of former associates, employees of Ketchum's firms that came through was it was kind of heartwarming. His daughter and one of his sons came by. One of his former engineering students came to take the tour, and he brought with him a paper from his college days with Milo Ketchum's notes on it. And to a person, everybody just had great memories of not just his engineering skills, but his people skills, his willingness to teach and train and bring up the next generation of engineers. So it was a fabulous weekend. not just because of the building, but to learn more about Milo. And one thing I'll mention here, those previous buildings we looked at with the barrel vaults, like the Denver Coliseum, the hangar, those are what is called short barrels. And I'll back up just to point something out here. Notice all the reinforcement ridges. At about every second one, there's actually a joint there. So there are actually, I think, 4 different shells placed side by side down the length of this building. Now they're called short barrels because the width from side to side of that arch is longer than the actual depth of it. And what the engineers describe is they would treat that segment of an arch as an arch. Now, the cool thing about having these short barrel shells that are built in separate sections is you can build one set of formwork, your elaborate wooden framework that you're going to pour the concrete on. You can mount it on railroad tracks, pour a section, let it set, lower the formwork, roll it down to the next segment, put it back in place, pour that one, let it set, and repeat. So instead of building formwork the entire length of that hangar, you build formwork for a quarter of that length and shift it down as you go. So these large barrel vault buildings are typically built as short barrel shells. And the engineers, when they tell you the span of a short barrel, they're speaking side to side from that arch. So when they tell you that's a 136-foot span, as you're looking into the hangar up that arch, that's side to side. Now I mention that because in this Ketchum building and in many of the smaller barrel vault thin shell buildings, these are long barrel shells. So the entire length of that barrel was one pour of concrete over formwork. And so I don't have construction photos of this, but the typical method would be you pour one of these barrels on the formwork, lower it down, and just move it sideways to pour that next barrel. And so this is a long barrel because that side to side span of that arch is much smaller. The length from front to back is the long dimension of that shell. And this used to really confuse me when I started reading engineering textbooks and engineering journals, is engineers will call the span the front to back dimension, that 38 feet, because they analyze this shell as a beam from front to back. And once I figured that out, it made those numbers make a lot more sense. So at 20 feet side to side, to an engineer, that's not the span. The span is that 38 feet front to back distance. And I mention that just in case you look at a shell building and come across dimensions that don't seem right. It seems like they're reversed or something. So that's one of my favorite local buildings. I say that a lot. Here's another one of my favorites. Who doesn't love a futuristic dome concrete building? Now, this one was also a product of Milo Ketchum's firm. This one was a little bit late for the form. This was 1973. He worked with architect Tom Height on this one. And when this was brand new, it had a small scene in the movie Sleeper. And I don't know if we have any fans of the movie here. I'm not a fan of the acting, but I love the buildings and the Colorado setting. So this played a brief role in the movie Sleeper. And I discovered it by accident one day, years ago, when I was just heading west on Alameda to a meeting in Lakewood. What I don't have on this building are any particular details on the thickness. I need to get back out there with my tape measure. Now here's another futuristic looking building that Milo Ketchum's firm worked on. and it also had a brief role in the movie Sleeper. This house was built for Frank R. Ross and his family, constructed in 1966. The architect was James Ream from California. Now it's got that very interesting, slightly curved catenary cone shape with a bowl on top. I don't have details on the thickness or the exact construction. I would kind of suspect they either carefully curved the rebar to get that shape, or perhaps they used cables to get the catenary form. I don't know. I'd love to find more details on this. Now, if you look at this house on the internet, it is frequently referred to now as the Varner House, and that's the name of some more recent owners of the property. Another one of my favorite buildings, the former Stapleton Airport, is the hangar that was built for the Ideal Cement Company to house their company aircraft. Now, this was another Milo Ketchum project, and the architectural firm was Fisher and Davis. Well, probably well known. I see a few head nods out there. This one had a span of 160 feet, was built as a short barrel shell. And what's interesting is look at it from above in plan, it's a diamond shape. So that barrel vault is only supported at two places and then extends out quite a bit, as you can see on each side. Now, because of the odd shape, this one is sometimes misidentified as being a hyperbolic paraboloid shape, but it's not. One of Milo's memoirs, he mentioned that they thought about that, but for the size, it was just a little bit too complex, and they chose just to go with a barrel vault. And this one was built in 1959, still in good shape, and it's now in use as a church. Up in Boulder, here's a school that Milo Ketchum worked on. I had read about this and knew where it was. From a distance, though, I was concerned that that roof might have been a stress skin plywood system because of the thickness. See how thick the edge looks on that. It doesn't have that nice, neat, crisp, thin edge. But as I got close enough, I could see there's the concrete. It's just hidden under some flashing. And I would guess that under that flashing is a nice thick coating of insulation, which unfortunately adds to the bulk, takes away from some of that crisp appearance. But it is, as you can see, concrete folded plates. And those folds or corrugation are giving it that additional strength and allowing it to have a good long span. Now, unfortunately, I don't have dimensions on the span or thickness. So if you have blueprints tucked away in your drawer, please share them. Another very popular building, and this is the work of architect Charles Deaton, working with engineer Joe Maheen. Now, this one I was concerned about because sometimes to get a sculptured shape, a shell doesn't always work, so you can end up with a elaborate framework, and the curved concrete is almost just a decorative application. But at a open house and lecture at this building about three and a half years ago, they had drawings there. And I was able to find the drawings that pointed out and showed the curvature and thickness of that shell. And in some places, it's as little as 5 inches thick. The interesting part on this is you talk about concrete being in compression versus tension. The ordinary dome shape carries the force directly down in compression. When you have a reverse dome like this, that's putting a lot of additional stresses on it, which was one of the reasons I was concerned. Is it really a concrete shell? But sure enough, it does thicken out. I think the average thickness of this shell is advertised as 6.5 inches. So down here toward the bottom, it is thicker to give it more support. But up towards the crown, it does thin down to about 5 inches thick of reinforced concrete. And this one was built in 1967. Now, as we're driving west on I-70, we've all looked up and seen that landmark that tells us we're either departing Denver or getting close to coming back to Denver. And that's the Sculptured House, also a project of Charles Deaton, and again with engineer Joe Maheen. Now, I have not seen any detailed drawings of this one to show the structure. The floor plans are easy to find on the internet, but those detailed construction drawings, I haven't seen them. But based on the work they did a year later at Key Savings, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt that this structure are truly concrete shells involved there. And I'd love a tour of that one. We should have a chapter meeting there if we could ever work that out with the owner. And it is tricky to photograph. I had managed to find an access road on the other side of the interstate and get these telephoto shots from half a mile away. But another classic shell. Another one of my favorite buildings. This one built in 1964. The architect here was the other Charles Hartland. I have not found out what engineers were involved. So if you have any documents with those details, I'd love to have it. These shells are said to be 2.5 inches thick. Now, here's the interesting part of this roof. And Josh, you used the term last month, roofitecture. And that really applies to thin shell concrete because that's what we're looking at really is the roof. Everything else is just kind of decoration or infill. So this roof is actually cable supported. And the combination of cables going in two directions essentially creates, I guess you'd call it, limp rebar in catenary shape. And then they sprayed the concrete, a gunite type process on that to create the shell. And I was glad to find that detail because I was concerned, can we really call this a shell or is it just a cable supported roof? Some buildings have the cables and then concrete planks are basically just laid over them as weather protection and to add some weight to the cables. And then they're just kind of grouted in, but without functioning really as a shell. But in this case, since that concrete was sprayed on over those cables, creating those large monolithic surfaces, I think it's very fair to say that is definitely a thin shell building. That'd be another fun place to have a chapter meeting, Josh. Now, here's a little fellowship hall in Denver. It's next to the larger Calvary Temple Church, which is not a thin shell building. But this little gem is a concrete hyperbolic paraboloid saddle shake. So you can vision if you took a Pringles potato chip and were able to very carefully snip off pieces of it to create a diamond shape. And then those two lower ends are what are attached to these buttresses on each side, with the other corners up in the air. Don't have details on the dimensions, thickness, or span on this. The architect was Ralph Peterson. Do not know yet who the engineer was, but of course I'd love to find out. Now, one problem with so many of these thin shell buildings, especially these hyperbolic paraboloids or some of the domes that have low buttresses, they attract people and skateboards that decide they want to get up on that roof and use it as a play surface. So many of these buildings are marred by signs, danger, keep off, no trespassing, no skateboarding, and frequently fences concealing those buttresses. Very sad, but I understand the need for it. If I was 13, I would probably try to run up on that roof myself. But it's a great example of just a single hyperbolic paraboloid roof. Now back to some folded plates. University of Denver has this wonderful dormitory with a great folded plate roof. Now from a distance, looking up at that third story, you kind of have to say, am I looking at concrete? Or am I looking at a plywood system or what? But as you get around to the service portion of that building on this lower floor, you can get close enough to touch the concrete and see it for yourself. Now, a horrible thing that they did here out of necessity was put these rain gutters on. And so as you can see, that nice jagged sawtooth line is kind of marred by having that gutter go along there and all those hangers coming down. But if we just try to visualize it without that addition, it's just a stunning roof. You can see looking up at the third floor how nice and crisp and clean that looks. And again, I picked a day when it was pouring rain. I have a knack for that. Now this, I just stumbled on this while poking around in North Denver looking for something else. Folded plate concrete roof. I would suspect it was a filling station at one time. You can kind of visualize gas pumps on these medians by those support columns, but I don't know for sure. Have not had luck finding it in city directories. But I think it's a great example to look at because, like those picnic shelters, this is pure form. You could do any number of things with this. You can picture a brick wall in there. You can picture window walls. You can picture any number of treatments to make that anything from a house to a restaurant to a store. But in this case, it's bare bones. Columns, the frames, and the folded plates. And a nice thing here is you can look and see it just the thickness of the concrete. There's no extra insulation on there. There's no flashing. There's probably just a thin waterproofing coating on top. But it shows you just the basic nature of the folded plate concrete. So I love this little building shelter. Don't have any details on it. I'd love to know who the architect and engineer were, the year they built it, those sort of details, but do not have those yet. So those are just a small sampling of what we have in Colorado. I think so far I've found 106 thin shell structures confirmed that are in Colorado. I've managed to visit 60 of them so far, so I still have some work to do. Yes, and we're going to talk about that one. And I'm only showing you like 17 tonight. So there's many more on my website, and there's many more out there. Nationwide, I've got a little over 1,500 in a database now. So things aren't always what they seem, though. I've been fooled. And so I always try to get as close as I can. I carry a nylon tip hammer in case something is heavily painted and I can't tell if it's wood or concrete with an impression from wood forms. So if the owner lets me, I'll reach up and give it a tap. But it is possible to get fooled. Here's some folded plates that are not concrete. They certainly jumped onto the fashion trend of the folded plates, but these are all plywood systems. The lovely Beck House, a Tasty Freeze. There's a few Tasty Freezes done like that, and this large warehouse in Denver. And these were built in about 1960, 1963 for the Tasty Freeze. So the form was still popular, but people branched out. The plywood manufacturers are like, we need to get in on this modernism trend. We can make things that are folded. So you see a lot of plywood coming into play in the early 60s. Now in the Beck House, the architect of that was Charles Sink, who's fairly well known in Denver circles. So these can fool you. They fooled me till I looked at them close and get more information on them. Same thing with hyperbolic paraboloids. Now, a real simple example is what used to be a Chicken Delight restaurant on Colfax over kind of toward the Denver Aurora line. The roof is two simple planes, but they work back down at an angle. So you have those two sheets that give that odd swooping look to it. The more complex one is the United Airlines building that's out in the former Stapleton area. From a distance, I was getting palpitations because I was sure those were concrete inverted umbrellas. But I got closer one day and it's like, wait a minute. I can see seams in those, and then these are even cut open and have screen put in the holes. So it's a very thin skin on these. Apparently plywood, perhaps fiberglass. I don't know. Couldn't touch them, but close enough I could see inside and tell that they weren't concrete. Very sad. Domes as well is it concrete? Is it not? There's usually, that protective coating on top, so you're not looking at raw concrete. So how do you tell? Well, I had to do some research on this one down in Rocky Ford to find out. Oh yeah, yep. The newspapers do talk about the wooden construction of that roof. So I get my hopes up a lot and then get them dashed when I do the research. And here's a beautiful sculptured building, the Brenton House up in Boulder. And this one is pretty well documented. Metal framework with a plastic foam used to get that curved sculptured surface. So it's definitely a cousin of thin shell concrete, but that foam is really not the structural strength. The structural strength comes from the metal framework, but that foam sure makes it look cool. And this one also had a role in the movie Sleeper. And this was another fairly late building, 1972, and this was also the work of Charles Hartling. And I took that photo from a public park. I wasn't in their backyard. I didn't climb any fences to get these photos. Now, there are some dearly departed thin shells from Denver. Mr. Gass, you just held up a picture of one. And in fact, Josh has a model right behind him. So I'm going to go out of sequence here. Rest in peace, the canopy in front of the May D&F store. This was one of Anton Tedesco's in conjunction with architect I.M. Pei. It was, as far as I know, Tedesco's only foray into a large hyperbolic paraboloid structure. He was pretty much a barrel vault guy. So this was kind of a reach for him. And unfortunately, this one was demolished. It built in 1958, demolished in 1996. And so this is the same principle as those other hyperbolic paraboloid structures, the picnic shelters. Those four panels are just arranged differently. Instead of having them arranged so there's a flat edge around the outer perimeter, the flatness is pretty much across the top, and then indented ends come down instead of going up in the center or down in the center. So it's the same basic structure, just arranged a little bit differently. And sadly, it's gone. And this was a very large structure for its type, 112 feet by 132 feet. So I'll back up. This is another sad loss. And I wasn't thinking fast enough to get photos of it before it was demolished. Lucky for us, Adam Stevens did get photos both before and during demolition. So thanks, Adam, for documenting this one for posterity. This was another Ketchum project. a series of domes, rows of domes, actually, a 50-foot span across, 2.5 inches thick. And the architect here was another very popular Denver architect, William Muchow. Am I saying that correctly?
Mucho.
Muchow. I always get it wrong. This one was built in 1961 and demolished in 2013. Very sad. And this is another gem that was lost to demolition. If I ever gain the use of a working time machine, one of my first stops will be to go see this building back when it was fairly new. The architect was Thomas E. Moore, who was related to the H.W. Moore, who was the namesake of this equipment company. I forget if they were father, son, or brothers, but they were related. And what we had was 3 different systems going on. 2 portions of this complex were very conventional, although large, V-shaped folded plates. And then one large portion of it had these shells, they call them Z folded plates. You can see the shape of them. And those are arranged in such a way that you have north light windows. So a stunning arrangement. I would have loved to seen that in person. And this was built in the mid-50s. And I don't know exactly when it was demolished. But again, it was a work of Ketchum's, and it's very sad that it's not around. So that's my little introduction to thin shell concrete. So I think Josh would probably have time for questions or comments.
Well, thank you, Scott. Wonderful presentation. Let's just quickly adjourn and open the floor up to questions and comments.
Well,
Like,
Scott
look,
was
say that was great.
Yeah.
That was,
good presentation.
yeah, terrific. And to see those things that we've looked at for years and don't realize it. And especially the stops on the freeways. Those are rest stops. But the other thing, the May DNF, I do remember that. And I remember that was where they displayed the jewelry and they had the purse, and that was all the very kind of high-end stuff. When you first walked into the into May DNF, you walked under that canopy, and it was actually beautiful. It's very sad that it disappeared. But
What
anyway,
kills me is wouldn't have made the most amazing hotel lobby. What were they thinking?
Yes.
yeah.
Well, Mr. Gas fought hard to get that saved.
A lot of people did.
Yeah.
Wellington Webb wouldn't be moved.
Yeah. Well, thank you for trying.
Who's the architect that did the motel in Sarasota?
That was Victor Lunde.
And didn't Victor Lundy have a vacation house in Aspen that recently got messed up?
Well, it wasn't. It was there. And I have to think of it right now. If it's a big masonry building, and it's a lot of buildings in Aspen, the older ones, you can move around the site and make room for additions. This one they couldn't. We could not move this thing, and it's beautiful. What they did is they built an addition, and the addition completely overshadows the original building. They restored the building. It looks great, but the addition is almost twice the size as the original building. And then they landscaped the entire lot so you can't see anything. So it's really, this is not a good project, but I've gone through it a couple of times before it was renovated, and since it has been, and it was a very handsome building, very simple.
I was through it before it was renovated. It was a lovely house.
Yeah. Funny little bedrooms in the basement or something, but the main rooms were spectacular. I was wondering, have you ever looked at, CU, down on Arapahoe Road where all the facilities buildings are? There's a couple of those roofs like that down there, and those were all built in the 50s and 60s and designed by, I think, the facilities people at CU, uh, not an architect. But I'm wondering if some of those are the thin shell concrete. Like they look similar to some of your examples.
Okay. I'll make a note of that. See you instead Arapahoe Road.
Yes, in Arapahoe, where the facilities management offices are.
Okay.
Arapahoe, and I'll get the address. I used to work down there. I just can't remember
Okay.
what the address is. So
I'm sorry, from 30th Street, I think.
I'm always learning of new ones.
Scott, I was looking, a bit of trivial pursuit, Scott, is that the original chapel at the Air Force Academy was going to be folded plate concrete. Walter Nitsch was going to design that. When he showed the original design in 1955, it was a folded plate construction.
I recently found an article I need to send to you then, Bob. All right. And maybe you can assess if it goes against any other sources. But the article said that original design was going to be a folded plate appearance with a metal framework with marble slabs. So I'll find that and get that to you.
It was criticized so much in the original presentation that it was never taken any further. So,
Yeah.
and Walter, of course, isn't around anymore. So I don't know exactly what the concept for that was.
Yeah. Well, I should send that article to you and Dwayne for your analysis if is that legit or was that right or wrong or whatever. But I've had
Yeah, and I'd be glad to forward it. Bob Brugman is kind of the expert on Walter Nitsch's work. He did the oral history with Walter in Chicago. So
excellent. Maybe you could shoot me an email or give me your email address or
maybe, I don't know. I'll put it into the chat. It's no secret.
Yeah, Scott, could you please put your email address in the chat? I didn't get a chance to write it down, but
certainly.
so I'm a structural engineer. I've had the fortune up at CSU. I'm working on one of those buildings, so I might be able to put you in touch with the facilities people for that folded plate one you showed.
Okay.
We actually did a re-roofing of that project many years ago. I was also very lucky to work on the renovation of the CSU Laurie Theatre project, which if you put us on campus, the camp stool, that was one of the first post-tension roof systems in America. It was James Hunter, architect, and Falk Jorgensen, structural engineer.
Like, yeah, I'd definitely like to
60s.
be comparing notes
To renovation of that. So
very cool.
I've also worked on. Have you done anything up on the St. John's University campus in Collegeville, Minnesota? There's an inverted umbrella dormitory building. We just did the renovation up there. I can send you some information on that as well.
I'd appreciate that.
Actually, the Nitsch, they think, was inspired by Breuer's experiments with concrete shells.
Yeah.
Hey Scott, are there any people still doing the thin shell concrete? I mean, can you go out and like hire somebody to do this stuff now? Or are there any new projects coming up? Or is this a long gone past thing that's now been lost somehow?
It's mostly a bygone era. The big exception to that are monolithic domes built on inflatable forms. There's a company in Texas that I guess, kind of has the market cornered on that, and they license their system nationwide. But most of the shells that are built in the last couple of decades are the monolithic domes. In fact, if you are driving down Alameda and you see the Mile High Church, right next to it is a gigantic, couple 100 feet span dome, and that's a monolithic dome built on an inflated form.
Yeah, other countries are still doing it. We did a project down in Mexico at Morelos a couple of years ago where we were doing thin shell concrete for a corporate office building. Unfortunately, it never got built, but we did all the analysis for that one. And then I'm dating myself, but back in the early 90s, I designed the British Embassy in Muscat, Oman that had a thin shell concrete dome over the entrance. That was 3 inches thick, spanning 80 feet. So that was fun. But it's all to do with labor costs and formwork costs, and nobody in the States is willing to pay that now, whereas other countries where the labor cost is very cheap, you can still get people doing it.
Thanks for confirming that, Julian, because that's
Yeah.
when I read, that's typically the reason giving is labor costs
Yep.
get too high. Because originally it was touted as an inexpensive way to build your warehouse or your hangar or your other structure. So yeah, I've popped my email in there. I'd love to hear from you, Joel.
Yeah, and also, this is going way back on that Stapleton hangar project before the church moved in. I remember walking around that building with the architect, and that building used to have much larger canopies that got cut off because there was so much corrosion happening in the overhangs outside that glazing line. Well, even back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when we first looked at it, they were thinking we might have to demolish the whole project, but it was pretty cool with the diamond shape you were mentioning. It used to extend even further out.
I didn't realize that. Very cool.
When Temple Emmanuel was first built, the new temple on Grape Street, the front canopy was a thin shell concrete roof like this. It was remodeled in the 80s, and this was torn off
Ugh,
because they had to add a chapel.
what a shame. I did not know that.
Percival Goodman was the architect.
I'm writing that down.
So many photos on hand. I love it.
Alan, did you take that photo?
No, that was in the archive when I was involved in some renovation there.
Excellent. Thank you. And Bob, I put my email there, so please shoot me a note and I'll send you that article. Where's your email?
Is that in the chat? I don't
I don't see it in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry.
see everybody.
I sent it only to Kimber. I'm sorry.
Scott, I don't know if you've ever seen them. Joel Hartling has a bunch of home videos of St. Stephen's
Yes,
going up. Have you ever seen those?
I have. And that answered a lot of questions for me. Actually seeing the work done on camera. Those are fabulous.
Do you know if any of these have been designated as landmarks?
Quite a few have. Not on the basis of being concrete shells, but, on other merits. In fact, a disappointing thing to me is you can read a nomination on a building. And it's like, oh my gosh, they're not even talking about the thin shell concrete or that significant engineer or this process.
Huh.
It's sometimes really just kind of glossed over even by preservationists.
Is that why, I mean, since the Hartling building had been designated, so in that designation, they didn't mention an engineer at all?
That one I don't recall.
Okay. Because you had said you don't know who the engineer on that one is, so I was curious.
Okay. Yeah, in that case, because I know I have that designation. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's wild. It kind of surprised me when I realized you didn't have an engineer mentioned. I'm like, wouldn't that be in the documents? But I'm assuming you read through them, so
And something I find interesting when it comes to thin shell concrete, that's primarily an engineering form. So when I read engineering textbooks and engineering journals, they'll talk about the engineers and not even mention the architects. And then I'll read the architectural journals and they'll do the opposite. They'll talk about the architects and just completely omit the engineers.
gloss over the engineer.
So it's quite a puzzle to assemble.
Since I'm dealing with these at the state level, criterion C, when you apply for national historic designation, says that they embody the distinctive characteristics of the type, period, or method of construction. So when people do submit those, they should really emphasize that it meets criterion C with the historic designation.
I certainly agree. And that's why I'm kind of like trying to spread the word and bring awareness to this stuff.
Yeah.
Are you aware, Scott, of the hyperbolic paraboloid at Broadmoor?
Yes. Yes,
What
indeed.
Pitcham did?
Yes. Still standing.
Yes.
In fact, I had to thin down this presentation, but I do have photos of that. It's hard to photograph with all those trees.
Very hard.
And I was lucky a year and a half ago.
And it's all chopped up inside. So it's not a pure form.
You really can't see the roof from the inside. But they were working on the outside of the roof a year and a half ago. And it was interesting. You could see as they ripped off roofing and insulation, you could see where the actual shape of the shell was. And then the edge beam actually comes up and forms a slight lip and then drops back. And so as I'm standing there watching them as they're ripping the insulation loose. But yeah, that's a great example. The other similar, sorry, Julian, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. You're still talking. I apologize.
I was just going to say that Broadmoor shell is very similar to what we used to have in front of May DNF.
Yes.
Well, we did redesign the event center at the Broadmoor right next to that building, and I'm trying to recall. I remember looking through the drawings of that because we were really worried about the foundation and the thrust blocks.
Oh, yeah.
And they had ties below the floor across the building to kind of close the system. And we had to obviously make sure what I was worried about is whether the ties, they weren't ties, and there was like a thrust going into the ground that we were going to be digging 3 stories underground right next to it. But I'm trying to remember. I could talk to the architect we worked with, Gregory Friesen at CSNA, who is a member of Docomomo. I wonder if he's still got the drawings for that one.
Talk to Greg Friesen.
Yeah.
He runs CSNA now.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's also on our board.
Yeah. I'll talk to Greg.
Yeah, I'd love to see some snippets from those. And that is a very common concern. So a lot of these, like the church with the hyperbolic paraboloid roof, there's a good chance there's a tie between those 2 buttresses underground. And the same with the Denver Coliseum with that hangar. More than likely those are tied arches as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm lucky. I live around the corner from that church, so I see it every day. What got you interested in this in the first place, Scott?
Well, for years, I still do, but for years, my main focus was studying military buildings, World War II, Cold War. And Tedesco engineered these 2 amazing aircraft hangars, one in Maine, one in South Dakota, barrel vaults with a 340-foot span. Amazing. And I read a construction document on those, and it talked about the form work, and it talked about doing a continuous pour so that you didn't have any cold seams in that concrete. And I was just amazed by that. And having seen those hangars in person, how big they are, uh, thin shell has always been in the back of my mind. And then about 6 years ago, I just kind of put the brakes on one day and said, okay, I'm getting tired of the military stuff. I need to just dive into thin shell concrete.
Fantastic.
Scott, what is the folded plate on top of Sternberg's office? Is that concrete?
You beat me to that question, Josh. I was going to ask it.
I was waiting for you, Tim.
I was getting there. I was being polite.
I would like it to be concrete. The thickness and the appearance makes me think it's probably a plywood stress skin system, but I want it to be concrete with just, a heavy flashing and a thick coat of insulation and roofing on top.
There's a Sternberg building, a series of Sternberg buildings, National Jewish Hospital, and one of them has a folded plate roof by Sternberg. And I don't know whether it's concrete or not.
Likewise, and that's the one right on Colfax.
Colorado Boulevard.
Yeah,
Colorado.
it's. Yep, I have the same question. Is it or is it not?
I don't know.
It occurs to me, Scott, last year for Denver Modernism Week, we actually flew a drone really close to Sternberg's office, up at the roof level. I'll see if I can grab that footage and maybe we can get a closer look.
I hope. Maybe,
Yeah.
Maybe you could train the drone to take a little hammer up there and tap, tap, tap.
Right? One other one that we're about to lose is I was looking back at, we actually went out to Newton Middle School in Centennial to document that building because they're about to tear it down. And over the gym and the cafeteria, they have a folded plate roof. And I decided to go look back at the photographs just to see, is that concrete or not? It's definitely concrete if you don't already have that in your database. But we're about to lose that one, unfortunately.
I was looking at our photo that I took when we were in there too and wondering the same thing if it was concrete. And I was going to bring that building up as well because of the unique shape of that folded plate. And then I also noticed that, West Middle School has a small folded plate side as I was driving down Bellevue. And I'm wondering if it was the same architect when I drove by yesterday. Just a side note, because it's a similar roof line on the one side, on the west side facing of the building.
So that was West Elementary?
West Middle School. I believe it's West Middle School. It's of the Cherry Creek School District. It's right there at like Bellevue and just after Monaco. God, I can't remember the cross street, but yeah, it's right over there. And then a building I was going to bring up that's interesting is I sent it to you in the message is Mr. Steak. The building itself, that roof, I don't think is a thin shell concrete, but there's concrete canopies built into it, so it could be. And so it's an interesting, if you look up that building, it's on Littleton Boulevard. And I wonder if it could be, it has the canopies, sort of like, imagine the canopies you were talking about built into a building, and that's kind of built into the front of that building. So it's a very interesting one. And then Littleton Boulevard actually had concrete canopies going down it for a short time because they thought it would make it more walkable and better for shade, but it ended up just causing this major disruption to the walkway, and so they ended up getting rid of them. But there's some cool old photos of those canopies on Littleton Boulevard if you haven't seen them.
I would love to see photographs of those. I've read about them, but I haven't seen photos.
I can email you, Michael Paglia and Diane Ray Tomaso did a study of Littleton Boulevard, and they bring up some of those topics and things. I sit on the board for Historic Littleton, so I have a lot of interest in Littleton and spend a lot of time staring at buildings down here. But I was, as Josh brought up, the folded plate of Sternberg's. That was one that I was going to bring up to see if you knew
what that was and whether it fit that. And then I may have missed it because admittedly my fiance accidentally set off the fire alarm from cooking while we were watching. Did you go over the church that's on Broadway in Inglewood that has the really big folded plate? It's a very wide, broad folded plate, and I
Yes.
don't know.
Oh, I forgot about that. I think Tom Moore did that.
Yes. Yes, I have looked at that one. It is in my data. Just I didn't include it tonight.
I just didn't know
And-
if it was thin shell or not. I know that that's an interesting building.
Yeah, it is. And thank you for mentioning Newton. I am familiar with Newton. I did rush out and photograph it last year when I heard it was going to be demolished. I have made a note to check out West Middle School though.
Yeah, it's on the west side of the building. There's a small section of folded plate that reminds me of Newton Middle School. And we did, if you ever need, Adam has more photos. We got some interior photos. Unfortunately, they had kind of boarded up most of the windows inside the plate on Newton Middle School, but we did get access to go inside and document that building just because I knew it was going away and I didn't want to see it go undocumented. Unfortunately, the inside had met weird renovations, and the addition they put on, I think, pulled some of the flooring, and the terrazzo flooring had started to dip, and so they weren't the best stewards for that building, which is unfortunate. And the new school is gigantic. And unnecessary, in my opinion, but what do I know?
When I
My
saw
tax dollars are only paying for it.
When I saw the announcement that Newton Middle School in Littleton was being demolished, I got really worried because we were designing the other middle school in Littleton. I thought, oh my goodness, getting rid of the old. Fortunately, we're on the other side. We're not destroying this school.
So are you designing that new one?
Not the one that's replacing Newton. We're doing the other one that they've got going up.
Oh, okay. So
That's
you're not doing
Frank.
the new one by Newton is a behemoth, and I don't know how we're gonna have that many students, but they say that school enrollment is down and they are getting rid of an elementary school in the Broadmoor neighborhood, and I have a lot of things that I'll spare everyone that I could say about that situation.
Scott, I have a quick question for you. With the Denver Coliseum, I always thought Roberts and Schaefer were involved with that. Is that not?
No.
That's where too.
That is true. Anton Tedesco quickly hooked up with Robertson Schaefer when he came to the U.S. And within a matter of years, he become a vice president and pretty much ran the show. So Robertson Schaefer is definitely the company.
Because I think they did work at if memory serves, Alan has a better memory than I do, but I think Roberts and Schaefer was involved with the 1939 World's Fair in New York and thin shell construction.
They might.
Interesting.
The firm was old enough.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I haven't come across that.
They're also associated with IMP on the hotel.
I'll keep my eyes open for a connection there.
Scott, do you know what was how was that church in Lakewood? What was the form work like for that? Because it's kind of like lumpy, isn't it? It's not like it's a perfect shape, isn't it? Kind of.
Are you speaking of the Mile High?
Yeah.
Yeah. If memory serves, that was poured on a earth mound and then excavated through the portals.
Sounds right. Sounds right.
That's neat.
That's great.
Fascinating.
Many of those low domes were done that way.
That was wild.
Well, I'll tell you, you mentioned the kids jumping up onto the roofs and stuff. When I was in college, I had a pal that took an internship out somewhere out in Yale, in somewhere right around the school, or I don't know. Anyways, we would go up there a couple weekends, and the house he was living in was right across the street from Saarinen's, um, uh, the the skating rink, the big humpback whale. And I mean, God, what a beautiful building, right? And that was all the cables off of the center spine down to the ring around the edge. And that ring was there's a little mound and then maybe 6 feet. I don't know. Anyways, I was there once, and the guys would climb up and sit on the spine of the humpback and throw beer bottles out on the parking lot.
As long as you weren't throwing him on the structure, that's forgivable.
I don't know if that big funky light fixture that sticks out the front of the prow, I don't know if Saarinen ever considered what it looked like from behind looking out.
Is anybody familiar with this house at 335 Birch in Denver?
Oh, that's it's a concrete house.
Yeah.
That was Eugene Groves, wasn't it? Eugene Groves, that's right.
Well,
Yeah, that one was on the market last year.
was it?
Yeah, that's right, it was. I went through it. Historic Denver had a house tour on Hilltop a number of years ago, and I went through it.
Nice.
There's a few of them similar to that in town, aren't there?
I think he did one or two others. I think there's one in University Hills, or University Park, if I'm not mistaken.
I feel like there's one on the north side, but my memory may be bad on that one.
Maybe I don't know.
It's amazing to have a group of people like this that you can just hold up a picture of a building and instant identification. I think about once a week, Adam helps me out. I'll send him a picture or an address and he'll know exactly what it is.
Yeah, I've actually been surprised that I've been as helpful as I have, actually.
I truthfully sometimes play the game with Adam where I just send him a photo wherever I am and see if he knows where I am. It's a quizzing game. Only once, I think, have I ever stumped you.
Actually, interesting. One of the buildings that Scott sent me was a building done by Gratz up in Thornton, which was one I was unaware of.
So Gratz went further than we even know.
I didn't know he did any commercial architecture, so
Nor did I. Thought
Yeah.
he did residential work.
I thought he was strictly residential as well.
I'll get to that one soon and see what pictures can be had from the ground. That's another case where massive addition kind of blocks the view. So we'll take some creative camera angles.
Yeah, unfortunately, the original building doesn't look like it did in the article that you sent me anymore.
Yeah,
But it's still standing.
Yeah, within just a few years, they put that huge addition on there.
Scott, you need to invest in a drone.
The thoughts crossed my mind.
You ought to.
Yeah, it could come in handy.
Scott, this is Ann. I just want to thank you. Great presentation. I'm going to scour Aspen for folded roofs and domes, etc. See if
Oh, I
build
know of a few. Would you shoot me an email so I have your address, and then I'll tell you what I know.
And also, I've got some photos of the Teller School in Grand Junction. Was an Indian school built in the late 1800s, and then they built a bunch of new buildings in 1950s. And a lot of those have the folded roofs. Now, I have no idea. It's been sheltered or plywood, but they are that roof form. So I can send you those photos too.
I would love to compare notes. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful presentation, Scott. I love that stuff. It's like, it's like I don't know. It's like a Gothic cathedral, right? Like it's just pushed, the structure is the thing, and the experience is just structure, and it's pushed as far as it can go.
Yeah, it's disappointing they're not, it's more. You might be entertained to know that you're not the only guy who's taken pictures of Kansas rest stop architecture, though. They have a lot of good stuff along I-70.
Yeah. Well, we've just kind of scratched the surface tonight. Like 20 buildings. And I could do another 100.
What's the church? What's the church at the end of, I should know, Colorado Boulevard and 285 at that intersection? It's a circle folded.
Universalist Church, Unitarian Universalist. Now, I put an addition on it in the late 70s.
They just put another big addition onto it, I believe.
Yeah, they did. They
Is that one plywood?
They renovated the whole thing.
Is that one plywood, or is that? I gotta imagine it being a circle. It wouldn't be.
I don't remember. I don't remember.
Try.
It could be concrete.
Yeah. I'm not sure I'm aware of that one, Josh.
It's a circular church right at the intersection of Colorado Boulevard and Hampton.
In the northeast corner.
Northeast corner. Thanks, Tom.
It's kind of like a flattened out coffee filter.
Yep. That's right.
I'll put it on my to-do list.
It's a good way to describe it.
I'm a poet, aren't I?
I'm going to titillate you with this one.
Oh boy.
That's a school.
Coffee filters.
Speaking of coffee filters, those are hyperbolic paraboloids formed in wood decking.
Okay.
Wow.
Interesting. And that's at Ellsworth Air Force Base?
It's at Ellsworth Air Force Base.
Things you could do with plywood, man.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
No, it wasn't plywood. It was 4-inch decking.
Huh. Did you design that one out?
A lot of work from the contractor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet.
Make a note of that as well. Cool. I learn a lot when I try to share what I know.
Cost $165,000 to build. About your numbers.
What's that?
1963.
Okay.
That was before the gold toilet seats.
Did anyone do a thin shell concrete A-frame? Is there such a thing, out of curiosity?
I've seen some perhaps churches built with folded plates in pretty much an A shape.
But not quite. I just was curious. It was one of those that it just came to mind when you're talking about it and all the folded plates, but then everybody always just builds a frame built A-frame and then puts either a metal roof or some sort of that material, but
Yeah.
we're surprised in some ways that someone didn't do it along the line. But
Yeah, there's examples like the church in Englewood somebody mentioned.
Yeah, that's kind of like an A-frame.
It's kind of an A-frame,
almost there. It's a very,
Yeah.
very deep
except it
folded plate.
doesn't quite meet at the top. And I guess maybe part of that is because of the folds. How do you get those to line up cleanly at the top?
That building's an
Just-
interesting one.
What one? Just south of the Deaton Bank?
Just
Yeah.
south of it on the same side of the street, yeah.
So that one's kind of a double whammy because it has the church, which is the A-frame-ish structure, and
Yeah.
then it has a folded plate building to the side of it.
Yes.
It kind of reminds me, there's a giant church in San Diego off the highway, tucked into a hill that has a little bit more of a presence, I would say, but it has a similar structure up on the hill in San Diego to that one in Inglewood, that it's a full concrete outside to the structure. And I cannot remember. It was Darren Bradley did a presentation on mid-century buildings in San Diego that I went to, and I cannot remember that church's name, but that was an interesting building that kind of reminded me. Every time I drive by that church, it kind of reminds me of that. Now, granted, the San Diego church is off the highway a little bit, so it might be way bigger and way more grand than the one in Inglewood, but it's an interesting building if you haven't been to San Diego or not in that area.
Oh, I have not yet.
Darren, if you get a chance to talk to Darren, ask him. He knows that area very well. I don't know if you're familiar with Darren Bradley or not.
Is he part of this chapter?
No, he is. Adam probably I can explain better.
Well, he's well known on social media for being a photographer of modern architecture, based in Palm Springs, I believe. By day, he's a defense contractor, but on his off time, he's a photographer documenting modern architecture. So far, mostly on the coast, although he says he's going to be doing a book on the Midwest here. But he's got a couple of published books of modern architecture and things like that. So yeah, Darren Bradley. I can probably get you his contact information if you would like.
Or jot his name down and Google for his books.
Yep.
We ought to ask Darren to do a talk.
He's great.
Yeah, we had
He
to do
is.
one for Denver Modernism Week last
Right.
year.
He just knows so many buildings. It's got to be crazy. I don't even know where he stashes all of them in his bank, in his memory.
I have to keep a database because there's not enough room up here.
I know how that is. I've got one.
You've got a very large database.
Mine just focuses on houses though so far, but I should expand it.
Well, we should offline compare database structure someday and see if we can export data to each other.
There you go.
Alan, Scott and I were talking about this church before the meeting, and I'll hold up a picture. I have an article here on it. Precess Concrete Institute put out a publication, and it says that the architect is Roland Wilson, but it doesn't have an address for it.
I've seen it. And I can't remember where it is. Roland Wilson. They didn't
That
do
surprised
he
me
did a
too.
church. Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly his wheelhouse.
No, but precast certainly was.
Precast was. I mean, that was his.
Yeah.
That was his thing. It's a nice building too.
Yeah.
I think it's well done.
Boy, if it's still around, I sure would love to take a look at it.
I have a feeling it is, but I can't place it.
You're gonna send me that, Josh?
Yeah, I will.
Appreciate it.
I feel like I've seen it as well. I can't think of where.
Yeah, and I mean, even the
Josh, put it up again, please. No, I can't place it.
it even looks in the picture. I think it's the sidewalls are battered. Yeah, they definitely
They
are.
appear to be, yeah.
But God, the little slot of light happening above at all the corners of everything.
Right. I mean, it's very well articulated. It's
Yeah.
very carefully done, and most of his stuff is so slapdash. I'm really surprised. I mean, the precast was a crutch for him.
Yeah.
Well, I can't place it. I'm sorry. Wonder. Huh.
I'll send you this too, Alan.
Where did you find that photo, Josh?
I told Scott, I don't know where I got this magazine, but it looks like I made a Xerox copy of somebody's 3-hole version of it.
Could it be one of those where they said it was in Denver, but it's outside of Denver because it was an older piece? Does it?
I doubt it because, well, it may be outside of Denver.
Because, you know, sometimes when other states would do an article on another state, they would just say it was in the biggest city that people would recognize. But then it was actually miles away from the main city.
Could be.
And I've seen that a few times. And so I'm wondering if that could be the case, if it's like in an outside suburb somewhere just slightly away.
Yeah, yeah, very well could be. Oh, here it says the T flanges flare at. Oh, that's no. Yeah, that very well could be the case. I mean, most of his work is down here in town, and the magazine is 69. 69.
Emmanuel Baptist Church.
Emmanuel Baptist Church.
That's why I've seen it. 366 Garfield. It's in Cherry Creek.
Oh, it's probably long gone then, isn't it?
I don't think so. I think it's there.
Is it buried under additions?
I don't know. I can't find a picture yet.
Well, add it to my to-do list. Well, Kimber, getting back to your questions, I'm sorry. We're talking about Mr. Steak, and that is concrete.
Okay.
Those are, I forget if it's like 6 or 8 of the inverted umbrellas.
Yeah, it's a super cool building. It was supposed to be the building they were supposed to build for every Mr. Steak, and then they ended up changing it, and then they ended up changing the whole front facade and like made it match the building they ended up going with. But then now it's kind of cleaned up a little bit. They've mostly kept it intact. It's a cool building. I think it's a temp firm now or something. I can't
Yeah.
remember, but
One of those days, I'm going to try to pop in when they're open and say, "Hi, I'm here to look at your building."
just walk down Littleton Boulevard or drive down it. There's a ton of very, very, very interesting buildings on Littleton
There are.
Boulevard that
Yeah.
people don't always appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yes.
that former Safeway, was it the Marina or
Marina style.
Marina? Yeah. I think that's a concrete, is it not?
That's actually a laminated wood arches.
Oh, interesting.
There were 1 or 2 Safeways built with concrete roofs, but more or less one-off experimentals.
Yeah, if you go inside there, you can see the laminated beams inside that one on Littleton Boulevard anyway.
I like never look up. I'm always in there looking for treasures because it was a Sabres and now it's an Arc.
That steak joint is a real carbon copy of that Victor Lundy motel.
Very similar. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, except that those umbrellas are all aligned with each other at Mr. Steak.
Oh,
Instead of being a
okay.
different height.
I thought they went up and down.
They're just linear.
And the idea, it says in the article about Mr. Steak that I had, that the idea was that if you ever wanted to expand the restaurant, you just add more umbrellas.
Beautiful. Alan, I have to ask, what were you doing at Victor Lundy's house?
There was a physicist who lived next door who was a friend of my friend Steve Barry, and they were considering rezoning the house. And at that time, they were considering an addition, and he wanted me to take a look at the whole situation. So I got a chance to go through the house at that time. This was several years before they started the work.
Yeah.
But my friend died, and so I never got to see it again. But I saw it before they did the addition. It was not in good shape.
Really?
And Kimber, getting back to the idea of knowing when it's concrete, I still get flummoxed sometimes when things are heavily painted or they're concealed by additions or whatever. So sometimes I just see it visually if I'm lucky. Other times, I'll resort to little hammer tap. And other times I'll dig till I find a newspaper article or journal article that tells for sure how it was built.
Or drawings.
Yes, or drawings. But I have a whole bunch in my possibles folder that maybe it needs more research.
I feel like that's how it is with half of these buildings, just trying to figure out who built them, when, how. I feel like that's a lot of research in general. I have to be careful because I go down the newspaper wormhole and I don't come out alive sometimes. That's how we actually figured out that Gratz lived in Parker for a long time and actually built a few houses in Parker, and I've only figured out one of them. So there's weird things you find out like that.
Yeah.
But I know Adam has found much weirder things than I found because he's been looking a lot longer, but
Oh, and Adam, remember you identified a house for me. It has two of the concrete roofs side by side. It's in Boulder.
Yep.
You knew right away where it was. I did get by that a couple weekends ago and was able to get some pictures from the road that kind of show the roof off.
Oh, nice.
Oops, I'm sorry. I think 366 Garfield is gone.
Uh,
A bunch of townhouses there.
I feel like everything is gone in Cherry Creek. If it was something cool, well, not everything. There are a handful that are left, but
No,
not
the-
many.
The Sonic Hall is still there because that's where, what's his name? Pat, developer of Green Valley Ranch. What's his name? Anyway, he lives there.
well, this is productive. I have a whole page of notes to research from.
Scott, did I send you an article on that house in Boulder?
No, I sent you an article on it, I think, with the picture. And then from that, you immediately knew where it was.
Okay, because I think I stumbled across an article I have about it.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
Maybe I should send that to you in case that adds any information for you.
Thanks.
I couldn't remember if I had sent that or not.
I don't
Because
think so.
I don't think I had connected which house that was. in my copy of the article, I never connected it. So I think I made that connection after I'd identified the photo that you sent me.
Yeah, it's a tangled back and forth trying to connect all the dots.
Yes, it is. I think I've told Kimber about that. It's like hours and hours and hours of staring at things until you make connections.
Yep.
I just have massive amounts of notes now on Littleton because it's hard to pin down some of the houses in Littleton and who was what. And I have a lot of jumbled notes and I write names down so that hopefully eventually they all connect. And it's
Yeah.
a giant mess at the moment. My notes make zero sense currently. Eventually they'll make some sort of sense.
Yeah.
When I can get back to the library, I think is when they're going to make sense and I can get a hold of the Littleton newspaper. But currently I can't get to the Littleton newspaper because I don't have it online, and so I'll figure it out eventually, but that's one of the challenges.
Where is
But-
this?
This is an old
This-
Street View from 2007. You know, you can flashback on Street View.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
There it is.
There it is.
I'll be darned.
366 Garfield.
And let's see if I go to, but it's gone by 2012. So 2007 is the only.
398 Garfield, it says.
Okay.
There it is.
398.
So if I move the bar up here to 2012, you can
There's the
see
crown-
all
There are
window
the
here.
crown houses.
Yeah.
Actually, a cousin of mine lived in one of those.
You know, that's sad. I mean, that's probably one of the few.
It looks as if it's been remodeled in that picture, however, because the corners don't seem to be open.
No.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay. Yes, it is.
There's just our angle here.
It was just the angle of view is different.
the cross is glazing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that must have been powerful.
It must have been an interesting building.
Good find,
Yeah. Good for you.
Too bad it's not still standing, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's I've taken advantage of that before to find what demolished houses or other buildings look like.
What
Yeah, I
direction
didn't
is the
even know
front
you
of the
could do that.
sanctuary facing?
This is facing north.
Okay. Well, what's interesting is in the photo, that tree is directly in line, at least it looks like it, directly in line with that cross. So I bet you would get some neat, you'd see the tree through the cross, you'd see the leaves, shape of the tree. That's sad because all of his buildings are all the apartments. I wonder how much work he did that wasn't apartments.
Yeah.
It's the only thing I know.
Oh, minute. There we go.
That's a shame.
So you
I
can
had no idea you could flashback on Google Maps, so now that's a problem. Welcome to the things I maybe don't need to know that I now know.
Yeah, I do that on Google Earth, but I didn't know you could do it in Street View.
Yeah, you can do it in maps, just on the desktop. You can't do it on mobile, but on the desktop you can do it.
Good to know. And I use the website Historic Aerials a lot.
Yeah, that's another
Yeah.
good one.
Yeah. Comes in real handy. Yeah, so for me, I'll take that article when Josh sends it to me. That'll be a database entry for me. And using Google, I'll get the latitude and longitude, plug it in there, and just code it as demolished. So that's
There's
how-
one other one I stumbled across an article for. Let's see if I can find it again. And maybe it's one that you already have. It's the CSU Hydraulic Lab.
Oh yeah, up at Fort Collins. I was just there about a week and a half ago.
Okay, so that one's still standing.
Yep.
I can send you the article I have for it if you don't have it already.
Oh, I love it. Thank you.
All right, I'll do that.
Adam, Scott's going to give us a download on some tentative stuff for our Greeley field trip.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, I
still
had
working-
mentioned the schools to him.
Uh-huh. And I'm still editing photos, but by this weekend, I want to send you and Josh a note of what I went to and, a photo of each for, potentially planning a field trip in that direction. Yeah, the schools were interesting. If you like a plain barrel vault warehouse that's thin shell, that's interesting. The city hall is pretty cool. It's in an old circular colonnaded bank building from the 60s.
Huh.
So that's kind of nice. Yeah, I had a great trip up through, Boulder, Fort Collins, Fort Morgan. High school in Fort Morgan has some fabulous folded plates.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Concrete.
Yes. Verified up close.
Nice.
Even though they tried to hide much of it with a flat roof.
Really?
Yeah. Yep, it's a shame.
All right. Well, excellent, guys. I think I'm going to jump off, finish up what I have here, and
Me
grab a
too.
bite to eat.
This is good fun. Thanks very
Yes.
much.
Thank you.
Joining us, Alan.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott. It was great.
Thank you, Scott.
See you guys next month.
See
See
you
ya.
tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.